There's a certain palatable transgender person who has been put forth in the media. Transgender doesn't look just like one thing.
There is more than just boys, girls, men, women. There could be people who live in the spaces between that.
In the 70s and the 80s, we didn't have language for that. We just kind of got lost.
I identify as agender.
I identify as gender fluid.
I identify as genderqueer. The older I get, the more I just identify with being non-binary.
I feel like I've been running from gender all my life, and like this is as far away as I can get.
People think that the word transgender just means, oh, switching genders or transforming. It's much more than that.
There are men and there are women. I am neither of those things.
We're in a time of a gender revolution. In some ways, and this is difficult to understand, transgender is a binary. In other words, you might want to be male to female or female to male. So some people live stealth lives that they don't want anybody to know that they're a trans woman or a trans man. So they're kind of fixed and located here. Non-binary means not committing to one or the other, not committing to male, not committing to female, but some type of transgression of the two.
I think people have a very skewed image of Southern California. They think everything's liberal and everything's accepting, but no, Black trans women are still getting killed out here. Trans people still aren't being let into restrooms. We're in danger everywhere we go, and just to be out there and to be noticeably trans is still super dangerous. I feel kind of comfortable in the community that I'm in right now, where I live, but I still get stares. I have people still will cross the street so they don't have to walk next to me. It doesn't feel good. My name is Quinn Diaz. I'm 20 years old and I identify as a non-binary trans man. I go by both they, them, and he, him pronouns. My name used to be Savannah Nicole Diaz, which is super weird. It didn't feel bad when I was a kid, It didn't start feeling bad until I hit puberty, probably around 14 years old when my dad started making comments why do you look like a boy? Once I graduated high school, I decided to tell my dad. He was very accepting at the first part, and then about a week later, I don't know, he snapped and he kicked me out of the house because he didn't want a trans person around my little sister. He thought that I was influencing her to be gay or be trans. I don't know. He just assumes that if I'm not wearing pink and playing with dolls or something, that I'm gonna transform somebody else into doing the same thing. But it's two cisgendered straight people raised me.
I identify as genderqueer, and my primary pronouns would be she, they, but honestly, I'm okay with he as well. I could feel one day I want to wear wigs and one day I want to emphasize my mustache and my unibrow. Some days I would feel extremely masculine and some days I would be extremely feminine, and that's when I started to notice that something was up. I had hair way down past my chest. So when I completely cut it all off to donate it, I started noticing different energies that I felt, if that makes any sense.
I think as she got older into 13, 14, 15, there wasn't any mention either way of being interested in boys or girls or, her self-identifying anyway. So I never really took much notice of it. She was just Talia to me. As right around 15, 16, she did start to be more expressive when it came to her feelings, and her hair color would change all the time, and she just, I could tell she was trying to search. So there was some soul searching going on there as to where do I belong.
A lot of the things that I had suspected, I guess, made sense. We've known each other about 5 years now, so when I first got to know Talia, it was probably right about the time she started to, I guess, explore some of these feelings or these questions that she probably had in her mind, but she didn't know what they were at the time. And I can remember about 2 years ago, like most teenagers, they communicate via text message. That's how she told us. She sent a text message. At the time, she said she thought she was gay.
I tried to tell them once, and they didn't really grasp the concept. And then I told them about 2 weeks ago. I wrote a letter and then I went to work for 5 hours in perpetual anxiety and fear. But when I came back from work, they were completely accepting, and it was such a nice feeling.
I was proud of her, but I was also worried. As a parent, you worry because you worry that they're going to get their feelings hurt at school, that people are going to, be very hurtful, and we did have some pretty bad things happen to her. It shouldn't matter what she looks like or what her preferences are. Who cares? She's healthy and she's happy, and that's all that should ever matter. But as far as the majority of the peers at her school, that acceptance is not there.
You'll hear like faggot or like he, she, and stuff like that, and I've been called that before too. But I know the people in my school, the reason why they're, say, closed-minded or hateful is because they're insecure, and they perpetuate, their insecurity onto others. Like, I think the easiest and laziest insult somebody could have is to bring somebody down for who they are, because anybody could do that. It's not like intelligent, it's an easy thing to do. So that's where it all comes from. So knowing that, once I realized that, it didn't bother me anymore.
It takes tremendous courage to be that person, because you're going to incur stares, you're going to incur bullying and harassment, you may face discrimination at school, in the workplace, even access to social spaces. Walking down the street, heads are going to turn because people can't identify you. And that's very scary and threatening to what we might call gender-typical people.
Sometimes on like the New York subway system, I'll be like waiting for a train, and someone will like realize that I'm in a dress and like tell me I should throw myself on the tracks. Happens like once every other month or so-ish. I think a lot of the mental health issues that I have are related to growing up under transphobia, and it's hard to separate out like how much of my depression and anxiety are just things I would have anyway, and how much of those are like learned reactions to being trans. I think a lot of people, like, what they're attracted to, like, has a lot to do with, like, what images get held up as beautiful in our culture, which means that a lot of people, I think, conceptually don't know that we're out there, and when they hear about us, they're like, okay, that's weird. But that does mean that, like, the dating pool is very small. In a lot of dating circles, there are sort of, like, default assumed things, or, like, it's assumed that, like, oh, if we go to bed together, we'll do X, Y, and Z, and I'm like, you should not make those assumptions, friend. I have, a lot of dysphoria when it comes to genitals a lot of the time, and I especially, like, I'm okay jerking off, but I'm not usually okay with, like, anyone else touching my penis. So, like, that's a huge thing. I think if we were living in, like, the nanotech future where, like, you could have any body you wanted at the drop of a hat, the ideal body for me would, like, have neither a penis nor a vagina, and would just, like, be some, like, totally anodyne, like, store mannequin thing.
Can you tell us what name your parents gave you?
No. If I had one wish from a genie, it would be for any possible way of knowing that name to be obliterated from the face of the earth. Being referred to by my dead name is very upsetting, because it just is associated with all of those memories of, like, being misgendered and, like, being forced to be someone who I'm not.
One of the things that's often not talked about is a lot of these people are under tremendous psychological pressure from a very early age. When you're constantly being told that you're a girl and you feel like you're a boy, that is very stressful. And so this little bit of stress, constant, day in, day out, when every time a teacher calls your name and you feel like there's something wrong about that, that stress is cumulative. So many of these youth have some other mental health issues that really have nothing to do with their gender identity.
I'm from Southwest Missouri. It's kind of a very conservative town, and it's hard to break the mold and to kind of be who you are without like being worried about ridicule. I had a lot of crushes on boys like any other person in high school, and boys don't want to date a girl who doesn't look like a girl. I'd say when I was around 16, I started to dress a lot differently, you know, wearing a lot of like baggier clothes and stuff, just anything that made me feel more comfortable with who I was. But now that I've become a lot, you know, more firm in my gender identity and who I know that I am, I can allow myself to dress however I want, whether that be in like a more masculine or feminine way, and I don't have to feel bad about like, oh, well, what if people misgender me? Because, you know, sometimes that happens and that's okay because they're just wrong. I just did a self-portrait, and those have always been kind of weird for me because how do I portray myself if I don't necessarily feel comfortable in the body that I'm in, which isn't the case for every non-binary person, but for me specifically it is, and I usually go towards very abstract forms of the body and things like that to avoid sort of normative representation of people. There's a lot of limitations on females, and I know that there's a lot of limitations on males too, and growing up is a hard time for everyone. And I think that for me, identifying as non-binary has helped me really know that I am capable of things and that I don't have to necessarily listen to those restrictions that were put on me just because of my body. I definitely had like moments where I was like, what the heck is going on? And I really didn't know who to go to or what to do. But that moment when I found out what, you know, there was more than two genders, I was like, everything just kind of fell into place and made sense.
As a very young child, I came into the world not knowing how I felt about myself. Obviously, most of us don't. But then very early on, my mother told me that I started running before I could even walk. And there was this sense of, I believe, trying to escape my gender. And when we would go out as a young child and they would put me in a dress, I would literally go run out and roll in dog poop. I mean, a 4-year-old and a 3-year-old behaving that way is kind of odd back in the early 1970s. And I had no explanation for that. But I had a father that continued to socially police my gender and basically policed me back into behaving as a girl, which then created this, what I call gender confusion, this gender dysphoria. In school, there was this kind of lack of recognition about who I was. And when I went to college, I came out as a lesbian. At the time, I didn't realize, again, that I was confused about my gender, but the group of people I hung out with were going through the same thing. In our 40s, we all started coming to terms that we were trans and gender nonconforming and agender. And I think that, again, because there was no identifiers for us, we just kind of got lost. And I'm seeing a whole generation around my age now who are just coming to terms with that reality.
Yeah, so in high school I actually came out as a trans girl, and then was sort of like, oh no, that's not quite right. And so I spent a while identifying as a gay man, and it was sort of one of those things where it's like, this doesn't seem like it's totally right, but it's the closest term that I seem to have for now. When I look back at like high school and college, I'm like, no, I was non-binary then, I just didn't have the language to articulate that.
It wasn't until college, like my first year of college, that I kind of was opened up to this type of thing. I had never heard of being non-binary. I knew about like transgender people and things like that, but I didn't know that there was anything else other than, you know, male, female, and, you know, people that wanted to change.
I first heard about the word non-binary, I want to say about like 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. I knew what the word transgender was. I looked up to trans people because I would, you know, when I was like 13 years old, I'd go on YouTube and see videos of beautiful, beautiful trans people sharing their stories. And then when I started getting more involved in the LGBT community, I just learned about all these terms that, you know, show how people identify. And so when I heard about non-binary, I was like, yeah, this is how I feel. This is how I feel.
It's still an evolving process, I feel like, for me, because for a long time, my default clothes was like t-shirt and jeans. with like a sweater when it was cold. But as I've been getting more dresses and skirts and things, been starting to feel that, no, I wanted that because it was like the most gender neutral thing I could get away with. But the gender I want to perform like has more dresses and skirts and makeup in it. So I've been moving away from t-shirts and into like things like this. But I'm still very much like exploring that process, and I don't know where it's going to end. And really my position is I don't need you to understand all the gender theory. Like, if you do, that's great, like, wonderful. But really what I need you to do is like, use these pronouns and don't use these words. And if you can do that, great, we're fine.
Honestly, there have been times when I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, like, this is too difficult, nobody understands me, but there's always someone that will understand you. Like, you just have to wait. You can make a place for yourself. Like, you can find these other people that have the same struggles, that felt this way their whole lives too, because there are people out there like you.
Growing up, I always had this kind of thought, like, I don't really think about like gender, and I don't feel like I'm like a girl or not a girl. Probably my worst moments are with my mom, because it's not like a sort of like, I see that you're this thing and I don't accept it. It's like, I see that you're this and I'm completely ignoring it and pretending that it's not there.
I think that oftentimes with that, like, parents think that if they ignore it, it'll either go away or like it won't bother you because they're not actively like putting you down, but at the same time they are.
I've had conversations with random people that I've bumped into where people have straight up told me like, that's really stupid, that doesn't exist. One of the first people that I told, like, hey, I'm feeling this about my gender, and she literally said, I don't know about that. Like, from what I know about you, you seem like a woman. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. Oh, God.
When you talk to these kids, and you talk to especially the younger kids, and they are so clear in the way that children are clear about who they are. This is something that they have noticed about themselves. This is not a choice that they've made. This is not something that they've been coached into. Just because it's unusual, the sense of being in the wrong body, sort of being transgender, it doesn't mean that it's not real. Sure, if you're somebody who is a cisgendered person, so your body matches your brain in how you perceive your gender, you don't think about that at all. But when you're not that way, you really do spend a lot of time thinking about it. And these kids that I work with, they go to great lengths to make some changes. So, which tells me that it's real, and I believe them.
There is a real community being built on YouTube for transgender and gender nonconforming people. So because there's not a wealth of information or easily accessible information for people about anything from hormone therapy to gender confirmation surgery, even to coming out for this demographic, you know, they're going to go to YouTube first, which is really cool. Because I think it's a way to go right to the source of people who should be telling these stories.
It all started in 2014. I was seen dancing with some Lady Gaga choreography in the back of a news story about a mall opening here in Las Vegas. And from then, literally like the day after, my life started changing. It was being shared on Facebook all over by drag queens, and celebrities were like sharing this video. And I was a freshman in high school at that time, so of course this was so overwhelming. It was crazy. And so from that, I started my YouTube channel, and I really just wanted it because I just wanted to have a platform where I could just share about my life, but also just really give a message out there to kids like me behind the screen who may not feel as openly accepted.
To be a queer kid at home, whether you're gay, lesbian, bisexual, questioning, transgender, gender nonconforming, to be any of those things and to see someone succeeding and to see all of the love that comes in for those people, that is going to affirm so many people's existence, you know. And we see that these populations, especially among adolescents, are especially vulnerable to mental health issues, suicide. And so the internet in a lot of ways can be a safe haven for them because it's the only place when they get home at night, it's the only place where they feel that they can see someone who looks like them or who acts like them. And they can also see them thriving and living their best life and being fabulous, you know? So I think in a lot of ways the internet can be a really positive space.
There is a ginormous network of kids on Instagram and Snapchat and Tumblr that are actually interconnecting in cyberspace for that kind of support, and on Facebook. And I think that those are spaces where they know are locked between them.
The first time I heard the non-binary genderqueer vocabulary was when I was 11 and going through Tumblr, and I didn't really understand it at the time, but I knew it existed, and I think that planted the seed of it's okay to be yourself. I thought I was alone in it, but once I became more close with people over the internet who were genderqueer, and I knew that I wasn't really alone in what I was going through, and that's why I'm so grateful for the internet, because I think if I had never had that outside source of information and just human connection, I don't know where I'd be at this point.
I think I've always had questions about my gender growing up. I remember being as little as 3 and just being drawn to like heels and the princess dresses. And I remember being jealous of my sister getting these princess dresses from like the store. It was more than just wearing an outfit and looking cute in it. It was almost like I belonged in that outfit rather than like boring oversized jeans that every little boy wears with a striped shirt. For some reason, I would tell people in 3rd grade that I was reincarnated from a girl. When I first heard the word reincarnation, that's when I was like, oh yeah, guys, when I was my past life, I was a supermodel. I was a woman. I didn't realize it until now that those were probably like the earliest signs of me not identifying with what I was assigned. You know, there'll be days when I get called a boy and it weirds me out for some reason. It's just this feeling in me. And then sometimes I get called a girl and I'm like, okay, I like it. And then, you know, sometimes I'm like, oh. A lot of people do like confuse gender fluid and trans woman. Like, oh, so you want to immediately start transitioning to a female. You know, I don't want to set boundaries for myself. I think that's the thing about gender fluid is it's like it literally takes out every single boundary that there is. Sometimes it's even weird because like I won't wear any makeup or anything. I'll just be barefaced. I was walking this is a true story too. I was walking to the boys' bathroom and this man stopped me. He was like, this is the men's restroom, miss. The woman's is on the other side. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went to the girls' bathroom, but I just feel like always, it's the proof. It's the proof that I can't conform.
We switched from looking in the male department for anything and started looking for all of his clothes come from the women's department now.
And it's kind of funny because now they share clothes.
When I was little, I always wanted a sister. Now I know what it's like. It's more stressful than having a brother, I'll tell you that.
Once he told the family that he was gay, he became more himself.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that allowed him to explore other things about himself. And so I think it was shortly after that where he decided, I like makeup, I like to push the envelope with the...
It's always been there, but it's just like, I feel like it gave me a little bit of a boost that I needed. Gender is so different from sexuality, and a lot of people don't understand that. I think a very easy explanation of it would be that sexuality is who you go to bed with, and gender identity is who you go to bed as.
People perceive that they intersect, but many of us are working very hard to unhinge one from the other. They've been conflated for so long, and they're completely different. Someone who is transgender, for instance, can be gay, they can be straight, they can be bisexual, they can be asexual, they can be demisexual, gray sexual. The terms go on and on and on.
The search for a partner is complicated in and of itself, but for gender nonconforming individuals, there are unique concerns that are not necessarily relevant to people who are gender conforming. Many of our users who are nonconforming wanted the capacity to be able to have their identities be very out there, reflecting who they are to a prospective partner. So we have 37 options, and those options are based upon what we came up with GLAAD. However, even then, individuals also have the capacity to write whatever other gender identity they feel is most consistent with who they are, because self-disclosure is a critical element of the dating process.
It definitely helps, yes. After, I think the first, social media thing was, changing your pronouns on Facebook. And then, Twitter doesn't really have pronouns. They use they, them for anyone when it's oh, this is this person's birthday. But, having it on a dating, meeting people app type thing, like Tinder, really helps, because oftentimes if the person that you, match with doesn't know, they end up getting, really upset and mad. And they're I didn't know that this is
if you spring it on
right.
them.
And then they're I don't know, they just react so horribly. So it definitely helps weed out the bad people.
It brings the right people to you, because I wouldn't want somebody that doesn't like me for who I am to be in a relationship with me. It would be a waste of time.
A lot of people are really concerned with what genitalia you have. That's what they want to know. And there have been instances with relationships that could have worked out perfectly fine if you weren't non-binary, that after that person found out that you were, everything just sort of changed.
It feels like even in the trans community, there is a very binary community that's very strict, and there's still there's transphobia in the trans community, definitely. And a lot of people like to think of non-binary people as just confused and making up a new word or a new gender. And it sucks that even the trans community is still exclusive to only fitting a male and female counterparts. As a Mexican trans person, I felt very excluded, both from my identity as a Mexican person and my identity as a trans person, because being a Mexican, they're not very inclusive of queer or trans people. And being a trans person, the only people that are getting attention are white trans people. There's this word, and it's called liminality. And I don't know the exact definition, but I know it's being in the intersection of two things and not fitting into either. A lot of people think trans people are trans because they want attention or something, but I don't know. I don't know why anybody would want negative attention put towards themselves. It doesn't make any sense.
As far as Brendan being gender fluid, I did not know that term at all, but I've learned quite a bit.
Yeah, I had no idea of anything about that
gender identity,
and now it's
stuff
kind of I want to learn more about it because Brendan is so involved with it.
Yeah.
Everybody's equal, so I don't look at him differently, just how I would look at my other friends, him, they're both the same. I'll call him she sometimes, but then I'm oh wait, no, he, but no, I use both.
Yeah. They both know that it really doesn't matter to me, and it's whatever's comfortable with how they...
In the moment, if I'm oh yeah, she's so pretty, with her makeup and stuff, I know he's not offended by it.
Yeah.
So.
It's a whole new world that I think that people would be a little bit more open-minded. You will find that it's like anybody else. They just have different goals in life. That's it.
I'm like anybody else. I mean, I go out to dinner. I eat from the salad bar. I watch my Netflix, play with my cat.
I'm a baker. I'm a tennis player. I'm an artist. I'm a really loyal friend. Oh yeah, I'm a big dog enthusiast. If I see any stranger on the side of the road, I'll be like, hey, can I pet your dog? And they normally say yes.
I enjoy making music and writing music and making photography. I enjoy writing articles, hanging out with great people as well.
I mean, making art, hanging out with my friends, going to eat, going to concerts, just regular stuff that anyone else would do.
Being agender is never on my radar unless I'm doing some writing, you know? And I get called sir all the time, and it's not like I'm gonna challenge that person. If it's a close friend, I'll say, remember, I'm just SJ. And that's all I wanna be remembered by is SJ. I don't want to be a footnote or an asterisk or have to explain being agender someday. Just want to be called and recognized by my name. Studies have shown that it takes about 40 years post any major revolution for change to really happen. So if you look back over time, for instance, the civil rights movement. So while we've had rights that have happened on the books, it takes longer for mindsets to change, and it takes longer for acts to move into policy. We're finally seeing all of those kind of formal sumptuary laws like destroyed and blown open. So there's just been this lag time. And what's exciting about right now is that if I look at the gender warriors of this generation, in about 40 more years, I'm hoping we don't have to have this discussion.